Welcome to the biggest influences. This is the real Joe Rogan.
What do you think would happen if human beings absolutely knew that we do have UFOs from another world, that we're back engineering and we're trying to figure it out, that we have been in contact with alien civilizations, we are being monitored? You know, the UFO folklore is, of course, that once we drop the bombs, that all of a sudden they start showing up, which totally makes sense. Like, okay, there's a detection that these people, these beings on this planet, they've entered into this new phase of understanding of technology, and they can harness the atom, and they use it to, of course, they use it as a bomb. Now they're using it as nuclear power. They're using it in all these different ways, and we have to make sure that they safely transition to the next stage of evolution without complete total destruction, which would send them back to, at the very least, the Stone Age. And then you're dealing with tens of thousands of years of, reinventing everything and getting back to the state where they were at now and give them another shot at doing it again. So maybe that's why they showed up, and maybe that's why they're monitoring us, and that's why they're here. That it's a bridge. They're just here to make sure that we don't fuck everything up. So that this is a very delicate and precarious process that exists with all intelligent life forms all throughout the universe. And that we're at a stage, just like, there's speculation and there's people openly discussing that some primates, lower primates, have entered into the Stone Age. They're using tools, they're using things, and this is very similar to what they think happened to human beings. And that over the course of millions of years, they'll eventually become like us. And that this is just a natural process that exists where intelligent life forms learn things slowly at first, and then eventually incredibly rapidly, which is what we're seeing now with AI. It's
totally logical. I think that...
Totally logical.
And in the way that we interface with species below us is, sometimes we're fascinated by them and want to learn about them and study, but other times we're like, a squirrel, okay.
Right, exactly.
And so it's kind of both of those things. Like, people polarize the conversation. They say, oh, they'd never be interested in us. That's stupid. Of course they would be.
That's Neil deGrasse Tyson's
just like we
take.
are
of
in
course.
everything.
Of course.
But at the same time, like, they probably also have other cooler things to pay attention to. Maybe there's other way cooler species than us to pay attention to. Or
I'm sure there are, but this is the transition. So if I was an alien life form with superior intelligence from some other galaxy or some other part of the universe, I would 100% be concentrating on integrating this new species into the galactic network, if there is one, and then helping them get to this next stage, because maybe life is fairly rare. Maybe intelligent life is much more rare. And maybe this thing that we're seeing is like these rare nuggets of some very precious thing that exists in the universe. And so they seek it out. And they recognize that this is the thing that brings them to the ultimate next stage.
Yeah, it's rare, but also potentially fundamental. And
right.
So basically consciousness as the core
right.
of all things,
yeah.
all matter. That guy you had on, who I actually connected with at one point, Philip Goth, he's really interesting. He's a panpsychist.
Yes.
And those, actually Annika Harris, Sam Harris's wife, wrote a cool book, which I also haven't read, but I know about it. It's called Conscious, and it's all about panpsychism, which is cool coming from her because she obviously is like rigorous. If you're going to be married to Sam Harris, you probably need to not be full of woo. And so she kind of explored, and I listened to some podcasts with her explaining it. And so this is a real thing that's getting taken seriously. It's not necessarily like physically provable, but like you can't actually deny that it's a possibility that consciousness is sort of the engine of everything. So, philosophically, when you're arguing against like materialism versus fundamental consciousness, like the materialists they kind of arbitrarily try to point to when consciousness emerges. It's like, but how can you pick that point? Like, because if all matter is evolving and like eventually becoming complex enough to, have conscious properties, but still, show me the exact time when you consider something conscious, because there's plants, there's all kinds of microbes, like you just keep going back.
Is it when it's reactionary to its environment and trying to preserve its own life, or is it when it's interactive and conscious to the point where it's communicating? Is that when we decide that it's conscious? Is it when it's able to manipulate its environment like we are? I mean, do we obviously prioritize our consciousness above orcas, because what we're doing to orcas is fucking horrific, and accepted in some strange way that, you can go to SeaWorld and watch something that might be as smart as us do tricks for fish. Like, why are we willing to do that? That's clearly a conscious thing that has a language, and yet we're like, yeah, stay in the pool, bitch. It's weird what we do and what we prioritize as consciousness. We seem to have like a caste system of our own, where we decide that we only favor things that are able to manipulate their environment.
Yeah, I mean, but that's way beyond, I think, orcas, like, that's so, maybe to other people, they don't consider orcas conscious, but I feel like that's like a certain type of person that really hasn't looked into this
they're
at all.
Clearly conscious.
They're clearly conscious. And then, but going back to microbe, I would say that a microbe is like obviously conscious. But that's just where I'm at in the conversation.
Maybe viruses are conscious as well.
Right.
There's obviously evolution in viruses. And
it's
very rapid. Look what we saw in terms of variants from COVID. Like these vaccine-resistant variants that popped up like almost instantaneously. That these viruses recognize where immunity is, and they figure out a way to move around that immunity and become more contagious.
There's also the words we use matter, like life and conscious are a little bit different, because something would be considered alive probably earlier than most people would consider conscious. Mm-hmm. So some of the panpsychists like to talk about experience. Is the matter having any sort of an experience? And sometimes that's a little bit more digestible for people.
Well, isn't that just an evolved level of consciousness? We have single-celled organisms. We consider them alive.
Yeah.
But they're not multicellular organisms.
I tend to lean towards it being fundamental, just because I can't place a spot on the emergent continuum. Like, it's just too I'm not gonna pick.
You're not gonna make me pick.
Right.
There's not like a switch that gets hit, or a turkey tester that pops out. Boink. Oh, it's ready.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when we look at a human, being born and like being in the womb. Like, people arbitrarily saying, "Oh, this moment, that stop."
Right. How do you know? Don't know.
We're not going to play this like number of days game.
Right. Like, when does the soul enter into the fetus?
But that's why Chris Rock and Louis also has a great bit about that, where it's just like, oh, you should be able to kill. Kill it. Mm-hmm. But you're killing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bill Burr has a great bit about that as well. Like, I support your right, but I also think you're killing a baby.
And that's, you would think that that just feels like a more healthy place to be having the conversation.
Well, it's just very uncomfortable for people, and especially people that support a woman's right to choose. They don't want to think of it that way, but it's undeniable. I had a conversation with someone online once a long time ago where Richard Dawkins was saying that there's no difference between a human fetus and a pig fetus at a certain. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's a ridiculous way to look at it, because a human fetus has the potential to become a human being. That could be your neighbor. It could be your best friend. It's gonna turn into a person. If someone doesn't intervene, or if it doesn't die, it's going to become a person. Pig fetus is going to become a pig. They're very different things. You could argue that a pig is intelligent, because they are. They're calculated. They do things. They're smart. They're smarter than dogs. Is your dog conscious? I think my dog's conscious. I have conversations with him. He knows when it's time to eat. He knows what I'm saying when I ask him if he wants to play. He knows. He's fucking conscious. He's just not at the level that a human being is. But that's also because he doesn't have the hardware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with the pro-life, pro-choice debate, it just feels so shallow, similar to the climate change debate, where it's like, obviously human life is precious and we should preserve it as much as is humanly possible. And guess what? Yes, if you choose to have an abortion, yeah, it's killing something. You're killing something.
Yeah.
Whether or not people should have the legal right to do that in certain circumstances, I'm not someone to answer that. But it would be so much more of a healthy conversation if we could agree at least on what we're talking about.
Right.
Which seems that people are trying to deny that it's life, which is not reality. And with climate change, it's like, who cares if it's, global warming, blah, blah, blah. Do you think pollution is good?
Right.
If pollution, if we all agree pollution is bad,
right,
then we're getting the outcome that we want, which is less pollution.
Yes.
But we're not worrying about based on, millions of years, who knows?
Right.
So it's I feel like some of these debates are just arguing about the wrong things, and it's just, we need to reset some of these conversations to just find the place where we can agree on one thing and then make progress from there. Because I think that a lot of people who are pro-abortion, like Louis and Chris Rock, who made those bits, which are kind of crude bits, but they're at least honestly acknowledging what's going on.
Yes.
Subscribe to Biggest Influences today.